Ecocities are cities that exist in balance with nature. They're socially just places where people can meet their needs in a way that stays within ecological boundaries. It's very relevant. The concept of eco-cities is important for small towns and rural cities because where we draw sustenance from, whether we live in a city or in a small town, it's from the land, it's from the ocean, it's clean air, it's the ecological services that we need. And those all happen in rural places more so than they happen in intensely urban development places. So cities absolutely depend on the rural areas, as do the people who live in those rural areas as well. Cities cannot exist without the rural. The rural can exist without cities. So the fundamental relationship is cities need rural areas to provision resources that are being consumed in the cities. But the reason why the concept of an eco-city is also important to the rural area is that we live in a full world, 7.3 billion people on a planet that only has 12 billion hectares of ecologically productive area, land and sea. So it's 52 billion hectares surface area, but a lot of that is ocean, some of that is polar caps, deserts. So only 12 billion is ecologically productive. That's all we have. So for all of us, whether we live in the city or if we live in a rural area, we have to be smart and careful about how we consume resources. One of the ways it can be measured is through the ecological footprint, which is a measure of our demand on the ecological services provided by different types of land and aquatic resources and marine resources. So we look at how much land is required to produce energy, materials of different types of food that we eat, the fibers that we turn into clothing or furniture, and how much waste is being generated and where do those wastes get sequestered back into nature. That's the whole idea of the ecological footprint. It includes both a carbon footprint as well as the land and sea needed to provide resources for our daily lives. I think people feel empowered if they know that there is hope and if they're inspired by passion to care. So it can look pretty hopeless at times when you look at how fast global climate change is taking effect now. There's a lot of things that are going on in the world that have been predicted for a long time and are happening now. So it's a scary time. But the flip side is nothing's going to change unless we make it happen. So I hope that people feel inspired to take change in seriously. I mean, the time is now. If you wanted to be proactive about reducing your footprint, it would be things around diet, making sure that you're choosing locally grown, healthy organic produce, reducing meat consumption, reducing energy use, both in transportation and the home. There's lots of things that people can do, and I think knowing about what those opportunities are can help make a difference. That's a hard question to answer. I'm a big fan of the concept of agricultural land reserves. I think that we need to get to a place societally where we understand that real wealth comes from nature's services. So it's fresh air, clean water, fertile land. Those are the real wealth sources that we depend on. Economy and money is a transaction of values that we agree on. But without those other things, without fresh air, clean water, we're not going to last long. It doesn't matter how much money we have. So shifting our values and really understanding that protecting those resources is a paramount concern, to me, is the only way we're going to actually be sustainable. And that's why it's so important that in rural communities, that land ethic, that stewardship and care is there, because the people that live in those places are the ones that are really going to define the future of sustainability on Earth. So what's happening right now is we do still have growing population globally, but consumption is growing faster than population. So it's not sufficient just to say there's too many people on the planet. That may be true, but really it's the people that are here now are consuming a lot. And ironically, in many of the quote unquote developed societies where we have low birth rates, we have very, very high consumption levels. So it's sort of a trade-off, right? The ecological footprint of someone living in Canada where the average family size is having 2 kids, for example, so 4 people or 5 people in your family unit versus somebody in a developing world context where they may have 7 or 8 or more people. The bigger consumption still might be happening with that smaller family in a developed world context where we have more access to energy consuming gadgets and high consumption lifestyles. I think good planning is really at the heart of this. So, taking a big growth in population is ideally, if you're going to do it sustainably, going to happen by concentrating people in the centers that already exist. So, for example, in Duncan, in Cowichan Bay, in Maple Bay, intensifying the development in a livable way so that it's enjoyable to be in those places. They're high density, walkable, you don't need your car, you can meet your daily needs by living a very low footprint lifestyle. That's going to help take pressure off of development of the rural areas, the agricultural land, which we still need for farming, which we still need for forests and for protection of streams. So that's going to be a very, very important piece, is the land use planning piece. That in turn, if it's married to good transportation services where people can, if they need to get from one town center to another, have access to public transit or low emitting vehicles, can also help. So it's going to be first and foremost, I think, planning, and secondly, some technology, or smart use of technologies. But ultimately, all of this has to be agreed upon by the citizens, right? It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Government can't lead unless people are willing to support. So there also has to be this shared appreciation for the fact that if we're going to take 25% growth in this region and continue to protect the values that make the Cowichan Valley so special, it is going to be a collaborative effort between people working with their governments to make sure that that growth happens in a sustainable way. I think land use is going to be one of the most important things that can happen. So the region working with the municipalities around zoning and service provisions and trying to encourage, for example, high performance in buildings, so energy efficient buildings, making sure that we're holding people to high values and high standards. The province has adopted a step code that is going to drive all municipalities to a higher building standard in the future. Looking at engaging citizens in business as well, right? The regional government, local governments, they're the front face. They're the ones that are in your community all the time. So being able to share with people through this kind of a speaker series that I'm participating in, or through other events that help people understand what the issues are and how to participate positively, is also a big piece. So engagement, land use, zoning, business permitting as well. I'll have some things in my talk later tonight to talk about what I think different roles and actors can do. A really important idea is this concept of one planet living. So living within the ecological boundaries of Earth. It's a whole system, and we're all on this planet together. One planet living is defined by a lifestyle that, if adopted by everybody, would enable all of us, all of humanity, to live within Earth's ecological carrying capacity. Carrying capacity just refers to those ecosystem services, pollination, respiration, hydrological cycles. So one planet living ties everything else together. If it's recycling, walking, cycling, taking transit, being energy efficient in our homes, consuming less generally, eating smart, healthy food, all of those things can fit within this concept of one planet living.